A colonel dunked Sophia's head in a toilet. She rose, dripping, and met his eyes. What she did next cracked the base like glass. Fuel ledgers, hidden cameras, a watch stopped at 14:07. When the screens lit up, the whole command blinked. And in the last 10 seconds, the safest door on base opened from the inside. The water was shock cold. Porcelain bit her cheek. Hands forced her under, then let go like she was a valve shutting off. Sophia stood in the mess hall with water on her face and metal in her mouth. The colonel's palm print stung on her scalp. He wiped his hand on his sleeve as if she were dust. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Next time, remember your place, he said, and left with that practiced calm people wear when they believe they own the room. No one helped her. Forks froze in midair. A soda machine hummed like a small, stupid song. Eyes stayed low. A cough wandered the room, then died. She pulled her hair back with steady fingers and walked out. The steel door reflected her as a dark blur moving through brighter metal. Outside, heat bounced off concrete with the steady rhythm of a drill. The motor pool coughed diesel. The flag snapped itself straight and pretended not to see. Sophia cut through the steam that bled from the laundry shed vent and climbed the stairs to her room. She didn't cry. She did not give him that. On her desk she set two things: a broken watch with a cracked face, an empty wallet whose hinge had learned to open itself. Her father's watch had stopped at 14:07 on the day he didn't come home. Time had stalled and never apologized. The empty wallet said she owed no one a quiet favor. Two thin truths on a metal desk. She opened a notebook and wrote down who had been in the mess hall. Who looked, who laughed into a sleeve, who stared at the floor. She wrote down the colonel's words letter by letter until they no longer sounded like speech. She wrote down the hum of the soda machine because it felt important. A small thing that kept pretending nothing had happened. Boots whispered past her door, stopped, then moved on. She slid the notebook under her mattress, tucked the broken watch back into her pocket, and left the wallet on the desk to glare at the ceiling. She ran the dusty perimeter road until her lungs burned clean. Dust climbed her shins and stayed. The road curled the base like a belt too tight. Out there, fences made the horizon a straight lie. She ran until her thoughts arranged themselves into rows. Night came with a thin moon. Sophia woke to paper scuffing under her door. No knock, no throat cleared. A folded sheet waited in the dim. 3 block letters, the kind that refused to be slanted. Laundry. Midnight. The laundry shed exhaled steam in her face. Inside, blue tarp slept over bins of uniforms. A drain cap sat slightly wrong, the way a painting hangs when a secret is behind it. Under the cap, her fingers found a metal flash drive, cold as an answer you don't like. A shadow moved behind a row of sheets. Rafiq, the old janitor, stepped out in coveralls with bleach ghosting his cuffs. He looked at her wet hair and then at the floor. "Plug it in." "Not on base," he said, and set something on the folding table with a careful palm. Her watch. "I found it in the colonel's office," he said. The second hand slept at 14:07. Time would not play along. Footsteps shook the outer corridor. 2 pairs. Heavy, rehearsed. Rafiq didn't move. "Just me," he told the men when they opened the door. They took the watch, called it personal junk, and left a bite of their cologne in the air. When the door shut, something thin slid under it. Another folded sheet. 4 words this time. We saw who watched. On the back, a single name in pencil. Kline the XO. The base's quiet second. Something in the washing machine thumped once in the silence. Pipes, a hand? It didn't repeat. Sophia felt the flash drive pressing her boot like a pulse. She reached for the handle to leave. It turned from the other side. The handle tested the lock and then let go, like a mouth deciding not to speak. The footsteps faded. Rafiq slid the drain cap back and wiped the table with neat, slow strokes that erased the places their hands had been. "Go," he said. "Walk like you were always going to." The corridor felt colder than it should. Sophia crossed the courtyard at a pace that meant nothing. At the fence, a guard's cigarette burned like a tiny planet. He didn't look up. The dusty road lay beyond the wire, pale under a moon thin as a shaved coin. Back in her room, she hid the flash drive under the mattress edge. She slept in boots. Dreams came cut into short reels. Porcelain, a hand, a watch face. A man she couldn't place stood in all of them with no eyes and a practiced smile. Morning put shine on the same routines. Trumpet. Metal on metal in the motor pool. In a small glass office off the hangar, Sophia fed a printer forms and fed herself the lie that paper is neutral. Numbers refused to be polite: fuel, rations, tools. Short by teaspoons in ways that added up to drums. Duplicate manifests with initials that were too tidy: KM Kline, Mercer. The patterns of people who believe they are ink-proof. She scanned copies to a thumb drive with the calm of a statue. Out on the hangar floor, the space felt bigger than last week, like something important had been removed. In the mess hall, laughter sat on tables and waited to be picked up, but no one's hand moved. Kline walked in with a tired smile that fit like a uniform. His eyes slid across faces, tagged details moved on. He sat with Mercer. Their silence had a shape. At noon, the laundry room was empty but not alone. A single towel lay rolled on the folding table, tied with twine. Inside sat her watch, taped to a note with a coffee shop name printed on it too hard for its size. And a time, 8 p.m. Not on base. She slid the watch under her sleeve and felt the cold circle settle on her wrist like a decision. At 7, she signed out for errands on a sheet no one read. The guard yawned and waved. The dusty road led into town as if it had been waiting for her. The coffee shop had chipped cups and a bell over the door that rang like it was tired of being struck. Rafik sat in the back with a used laptop in a grocery bag and another old watch on the table for proof. Its second hand ticked too loudly. He pushed her the bag and said, "Plug it now. Not here again." Folders called themselves innocent things: repairs, coaching, birthdays. She opened one at random and Mercer's voice stepped out without hurry. "Move the excess fuel before the audit," he said like he was reading a recipe. Another voice laughed. The laugh belonged to a person who had never been told no and had never tripped over a word. A video labeled "Drills" opened to the mess hall door. Then the angle climbed the wall and fixed on her. Someone had filmed it. The dunk, the hand, the way the room held its breath and swallowed it. In the far corner of the frame stood a figure with a tie that didn't belong to the base. Not Kline, not one of theirs. The inspector from command, the man who gave speeches about accountability and left before questions. "You can take this to command," Rafik said. "They will be careful. Or you can take it to everyone all at once and make careful look expensive." "How?" she asked. "Every building in love with itself has screens," he said. "The rec hall, the gym, a switch in break room C that feeds them all. You throw it and they eat whatever you give them." The bell over the door chimed. 2 men with haircuts that held angles stepped in and didn't look around. Rafik stirred an empty cup as if that were a normal thing to do. "Walk out the back. Take the exit that smells like motor oil," he said without moving his mouth. She found the motor pool from the wrong direction and kept moving like a person with nowhere in particular to be. At the gate, the guard looked up with a frown he may have been saving for later. "The colonel wants to see you," he said, and the syllables came patient like nothing new would ever happen. Mercer's office was conditioned air and framed certainties. He set her father's watch on the desk as if he were loaning her time. "Funny thing about time," he said. "On this base it moves when I say it moves." He flicked the second hand with a fingernail. It didn't care. Kline sat to the side and smiled like a gentle answer. Mercer slid a heavy envelope across the wood. "Find yourself a transfer," he said. "Start over." Her empty wallet pressed a flat warning against her thigh. She didn't touch the envelope. "I'm not for sale," she said. Mercer smiled with too many teeth. "Everyone is," he said, and left the room with the certainty of a man who had never tested that theory. In her room, she found her notebook open to a page she hadn't opened. Half her notes were torn out with a patient hand. In their place, a single sheet lay centered. Her father's watch sketched in pencil. Arrows, letters. BRK RM C, Symbolic, Rec Hall, all screens. At the bottom, the frozen time, 14:07. Under it, a sentence. "When the second hand moves, you'll need to run." The light flickered. Somewhere a breaker popped like a tongue against teeth. On her wrist, the second hand jumped. Once. Sophia stared at the watch until the second hand felt like an eye. It had moved. Not a trick, not nerves. A single tick that meant the drawing wasn't just a drawing. She slid the page into her hoodie, left the room, and walked the corridor like the hallway belonged to someone else and she was borrowing it. Break room C hid behind 2 vending machines and the smell of stale popcorn. Inside, a metal panel hummed like a throat clearing. 4 fat cables, 1 cracked thumb switch marked with tape. RH, Rec Hall. She turned the coin in her fingers. Loosen the screws and open the box. Don't, said a voice behind her. Nor, the medic with eyes like time had taught them patience. She slipped inside and locked the door with 2 fingers. You flip that, she said, and Kline kills the circuit from his office. He has a gray box on his wall and a talent for pretending he doesn't. Then she held up a bent badge with handwriting on the back. Rafik, me, and one more. If you're going to do this, we need delay. Ellis slid in sideways like a secret poured through a narrow mouth, a young private with guilt and focus in equal measures. 3-second buffer, he said, pulling a small dongle and thin cable from his sleeve. We route the feed through the rec hall camera first. Kline kills the displays once. The second input sticks. Sophia felt Hope step into the room and find a chair. Show me, she said. They crossed into the rec hall like it was any afternoon. Televisions brooded from the walls. The big screen reflected a glossy version of the room. The service camera blinked a green dot above the door. Ellis tapped 3 hidden buttons on the small control panel and opened a service port under a plastic flap that never wanted attention. Sophia slid the flash drive in. The drive seated with a soft conviction. Back in break room C, she placed her palm on the cracked cap and listened to the building hum through the wire. Her watch ticked again, too loud in such a small space. She flipped the switch, current inhaled. On the big screen, the live room appeared. Rec in the corner, the pool table in the foreground, quiet faces staring at themselves. Across the courtyard, Kline's office light came on. A shadow moved. The kill switch clicked. Black. A breath of it. Then the frame tore and Mercer's voice flowed into the room like a chemical. Move the excess fuel before the audit. Heads lifted. Cue balls slowed. No one's mouth found the right shape for a while. Kline's window showed him wrenching his switch again. The screen blinked. The second input held like fingers dug into a ledge. The mess hall filled the screen now. The dunk, the hand. The way she came up with water in her eyes and steel in her jaw. At the edge of the frame, that inspector stood again. Tie too clean. Posture practiced. Major Daniels, the man who said accountability with a smile and left before questions. Faces in the room bent toward the screen as if it had gravity. Radio static burst in the hall. MPs hit the corridor at a run, but not for her. For the sound. For the room that now told truths in large letters. One of the MPs reached her, then hesitated as Mercer's voice on the recording said her name like a detail to remove. The tall MP stepped aside half an inch and whispered, "Run." She ran, not for the front gate, for the dusty service road behind the gym, for the weak spot in the fence near the broken bleachers where base kids watched softball and learned the shapes of cheers. Boots thundered behind her. Orders cracked. A truck coughed awake. Noor pulled her into the gym's shadow. Ellis waited, bolt cutters across his arms like something that might bite if you didn't pet it right. Rafik held a canvas satchel like a relic. "The rec hall is chewing itself," Noor said. "We have minutes." Kline's voice came through the PA, brittle and sure at the same time. "All personnel remain in place. Movement restricted. For your safety." Words that meant the opposite of what they said. The floodlight near the bleachers buzzed without brightening. Ellis cut the chain on the service gate in 2 strokes. Links fell with a small metal prayer. Kline stepped out of the dark alone and smiling. A man trying on a mask he believed was his face. "Where would you go?" he asked. "As long as there's a base, there's a file. As long as there's a file, there's a lock." The tall MP appeared behind him and touched his sleeve, not hard but finally. "Sir," the MP said, and the word didn't sound like respect anymore. A civilian sedan rolled up the dusty road with its headlights down, the sound of its tires low and certain. Noor opened the back. "Friend of a friend," she said. They slid in. The fence and its straight lies fell behind them. In town, a door opened into a small room full of wires and coffee. Lila, a reporter, peeled off gloves and said, "Put your ghosts here." Files opened. Mercer's voice spilled. Ledgers grew numbers. The inspector's tie shone too neat in a corner of a frame. They planned a morning stream. 10 places at once. Make careful look expensive. But the door banged, and 2 men with badges but no names filled the room. "Captain Sophia," the tall one said. "Under arrest for theft of government property." Noor stepped between them and named the lie. They cuffed Sophia anyway and drove her through streets that tried to pretend it was just another night. They pulled into an unmarked garage. The tall one leaned in and whispered, "Nice work." "They're waiting." He cut the cuffs and handed her the key. A door opened and poured fluorescent into a small room, with a camera and a table and a woman in a black suit with a face that had learned to listen. "Begin," the woman said. Sophia looked into the red light and started at the beginning. When she finished, the woman's phone lit without a name. "Independent investigators are inbound," she said after a long silence. "Fast." The room exhaled, then the lights cut. The camera blinked dead. A duffel near the file cabinet showed a little window with red numbers falling. 30. 29. 28. Ellis said bomb, and Noor said look again, and when Sophia unzipped it, clay that didn't smell like anything angry stared back. A scrambler blinked behind a snapped faceplate in the wall. She pulled the plug. The camera's red eye opened. The building found half its voice. Kline's voice flooded the PA again, thinner now, desperate and wide. "Remain in place. This is for your safety." Lila rerouted the feed through a satellite path polite people like to forget. The gate cameras sprang back to life, silver and white vehicles crossing into the base with a grace that had practice behind it. The woman in black answered her phone and said, actually breathing now, "They're here." The door slammed. Two men in plain clothes, eyes steady, hands pretending to be empty. The tall MP planted himself between them and the camera and chose where his career ended. The third man's hand grabbed for the tripod and found Lila's cable instead. She snapped it against his wrist and the camera held. Sophia's watch ticked hard against her skin like a tiny boot on a door. The room leaned toward the next second. The investigators reached the admin hall with a sound like weather changing. Their badges weren't shields. They were keys. Behind them came Mercer, wrists cuffed, shirt askew, the heat gone from his authority. He saw the screens and looked for a smaller place inside himself. He didn't find one. Kline arrived in a pair of hands that didn't belong to him. His smile had lost its job. The inspector from command, Major Daniels, did not arrive. His name rang down phone lines and hit soft fingers that stalled as if the letters weighed too much. "External," the woman in black said. "We're reaching." Rafik said, "Reach farther," and set his satchel on the table. Inside lay other people's ghosts. Hard drives wrapped in rags, printed ledgers, a camera block with a date taped to it and a memory in its glass. In the rec hall, the big screen kept its grip. People stood in doorways and did not pretend to be busy. The gym served silence instead of noise. Out by the fence, the dusty road waited, remembering the weight of every shoe that had ever tried to leave. "Top of the hour," Lila said. 10 outlets. 2 that hate me. A town station that owes me a favor." The woman in black tapped her pen and didn't ask if anyone was certain. They weren't. Certainty felt like a word Kline would use. Sophia lifted her wrist to the camera. The broken watch caught the room's light and refused to tick. "My father's watch stopped the day he didn't come home," she said. "I thought it meant time could die. Today I learned it can wait." Boots gathered outside the door to their room, not angry, only inevitable. The tall MP set his palm against the frame and listened with his bones. The emergency light shivered. The red dot held. "Hold," the woman in black said, and the word acted like a brace. Phones lit in rooms all over the base. Screens told the same story and didn't blink. The mess hall video did a work no one had hired it to do. The ledger scans named amounts and dates with a precision that hurt. The audio stitched voices to numbers. The inspector, his tie too clean, stood again in the corner of a frame and didn't leave. When men in shirts with white cuffs at last understood that they had been filmed inside someone else's story, they ran toward halls they did not know how to defend. The building breathed and died in pieces, power-hopping circuits like a fox zigzagging through tall grass. The decoy duffel's numbers hit 0 and did nothing but stop being numbers. The scrambler lay on the table like a tooth pulled and still angry about it. Outside, the silver and white vehicles spread out along the access roads. Investigators moved past salutes without stopping to collect them. The door opened a fraction. The tall MP pushed it shut with 2 fingers. "Orders," a voice said outside. "Stand down," he answered without checking who had given the order. Inside, Noor steadied Ellis with a hand to his shoulder. Rafik unrolled a cable with the stubborn patience of a man fishing wire through a wall he'd already patched twice. Lila spoke to the camera in her low newsroom voice. "If you are watching this in your room," she said, "open your door. Step into the hall. Look left, look right. Decide if fear looks the same on a face you know." Sophia followed. She named Mercer and Kline without heat like coordinates. She shaped Daniel's name carefully and watched the room beyond the lens move as if leaning forward. In the gate feed, a convoy of cars in ordinary paint, unimpressed by sirens, turned onto the base. The woman in black took a call and said, "Yes, ma'am."